With that, I will call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Tonight is January 11th, 2024. I am Lisa Ellsworth, the Chair of the Planning Commission. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission. May I get a roll call?
Commissioner Corning.
Here.
Commissioner Bravo.
Here.
Commissioner Berlin is absent. Commissioner Bartel.
No.
Here.
Oh, Commissioner Lassen, did I just hear you? Oh, excuse me. Vice Chair Hernandez Mahey.
Here.
Chair Ellsworth.
Here. Okay. Will you all join me in the roll call or the flag salute?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes.
Are there any additions or corrections?
One quick question. I know Commissioner Lassen had sent an email regarding technical difficulties and that note was added. Would that change on the top where it says absent to present then? Because the updated one still said absent.
I will turn to our attorneys and ask them.
Yeah, I know that there was a note added when the commissioner dropped off of the call. And so, generally for the roll call, if that individual was present during the roll call, that should be corrected to say present. And then we'll put the note in the minutes for when they dropped off of the meeting call.
Okay.
Comes later.
You can make a quick motion to that effect if you wanted.
All right, along with the approval of the minutes or just that? Because otherwise I move to approve the minutes with the change added of changing Commissioner Lassen from present to absent at the top of the notes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for catching that. Okay, do we have any business from the audience? Anything that is not on the agenda for later this evening? Does anyone want to bring anything to the Planning Commission that is not already on the agenda? Now is your time. Seeing none, I don't see any online either, so we will move on to communications. And communications from staff.
I don't have any more. Thank you.
Okay, so tonight there will be 3 public hearings. They are quasi judicial land use hearings. The purpose of each hearing is to ensure that the interested parties can offer relevant evidence to the commission in a timely and orderly manner. So the reason for the public hearing is so that anyone that wants to testify and provide testimony to the commission, that will be your time to do that. Okay. I'd like to remind the commissioner, well, hold on just a moment. Okay, I'd like to remind the commission that this is a quasi judicial land use matter. And as such, we need to maintain an open mind and not make any decisions until after the hearing is closed and all the evidence presented at the hearing has been considered. I will now open the agenda. No, pardon me. I apologize. We have new language that I have not used before in this setting, and it's taking me a minute to catch up. Okay. Okay, there we go. So with that, I would like to open the public hearing for MOC 23-03 to CU 22-01 related to Townsend Farms at 960 Young Street. This is a modification of condition applications to modify the conditional use from 22-02, the Townsend Farms Industrial Freezer Building addition and expansion that the commission approved January 26th of 2023, and for which the building division had issued a permit 971-23-0000102-STR-02. That permit was issued on June 20th of 2023. This is a request to not widen and improve Young Street frontage with more asphalt, new curbs, landscape strip, and street trees, and a wider sidewalk. And it's also to not screen the east side of the north outdoor storage yard with shrubbery inside the east lot line. This request includes the applicant's desire to strike through and underline revisions to conditional use 22-02, conditions approval, D1 sub A3, condition use 1A2 through 4, and conditional use 5. So this is a modification of conditions for 23-03. I'm sorry, that was a mouthful. So the first thing I'd like to ask the commission is there any ex parte contact with the applicant or other individuals in which this was discussed? And any site visits?
Not for me.
Not for me.
For myself, not for me either. So no. Are there any conflicts or biases which would preclude you from an open and fair deliberation of the motion?
Not for me.
No.
Anyone online?
Nope.
Okay. Are there any challenges from the audience? Thank you. Now I'm going to ask staff to read the quasi judicial land use hearing statement. You're up, Chris.
Both Oregon law and the Woodburn Development Ordinance govern evidentiary quasi-judicial land use hearings and require that the commencement of any hearing, this statement be read to all persons in attendance. The applicable substantive criteria for this land use decision are listed in the staff report and are as follows, and they are from the Woodburn Development Ordinance. WDO 1.02, WDO 1.04, WDO 1.05, WDO 2.01, WDO 3.01, 3.02, 3.06, 4.01, and 4.02. The hearing will proceed in the following general order: staff report, applicant's presentations, testimony in favor of the application, testimony in opposition to the application, rebuttal, closing of the record, deliberation, and decision. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria just stated or other criteria in a plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party wanting a continuance or to keep the record open must make that request while the record is still open.
Okay, thank you. We will now have the staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm Colin Cortez, Senior Planner with the City of Woodburn. And in just a moment, I will bring up the PowerPoint for first agenda item. The issue before the Commission is what's called a modification of conditions which is an application that has the purpose of modifying some other previous land use approval. In this case, it was a conditional use for an industrial expansion that the commission approved last January on the subject property for Townsend Farms. And because the commission originally made the decision on that approval, the modification is also something that the commission gets to decide upon. And as a formality, there's a staff report with some attachments that I've entered into the record. And up until this point, there wasn't any advance written testimony from the applicant or the public. As a reminder, the site is not quite 4 acres, commercially zoned. It has been long occupied by Townsend Farms Berry Business. The approval from last year was partial redevelopment through building addition for an industrial freezer. And the heart of the matter for this modification of conditions or MOC application is 2 requests. And the first relates to Young Street frontage. The applicant is asking to not widen and improve the street. So to avoid having to demolish existing curb or additional asphalt, change the striping and markings in the roadway, build new curb that tapers to existing curb on either side of the property, and then install a new planter strip with street trees and new sidewalk. The second request relates to a condition on the conditional use from last year. There's an existing outdoor storage yard in the front yard of the property. This is the north area of the property, which is visible from Young Street. And the condition required that it be screened from the east, and the applicant is requesting to not do that condition. And I'll take just a moment to make sure our viewers at home can see the presentation.
We can't as of right now. There it is. Thank you very much.
As a reminder of where the site is, this is the area where it is along Young Street, highlighted in green and the vicinity of it circled. And this is an aerial view close-up of the property outlined in green. And the 2 areas in question, as I mentioned, are along Young Street, here where the cursor is, and then approximately this area on the east side where the cursor is. As far as the existing condition and what the proposal is, getting into a little more detail, here are 2 views of existing conditions. At the top is a photo looking from Young Street. You can see there's a narrow planter, no street trees, narrow sidewalk, and some existing mature shrubbery in the front yard. And on the bottom photo, you can see a view of the existing east lot line fencing and the uppermost parts of the material stored in the storage yard. So as I mentioned before, for the front yard, the request is to leave these existing improvements in place. So essentially the request is to have this photo of what is out there today remain the same. And I'll add as background that in the time the commission approved it and the proposal went through building permit, the applicant's already dedicated the required amount of right-of-way. It is hinted at in this drawing. So if you can follow the cursor, this upper dashed line indicates where the right-of-way line, the boundary between the private property and the street was. And with the additional 6 feet, it is this lower additional bold dashed line here. So there's enough room for the condition improvements. Moving on to the second request about the shrubbery. The applicant asked for basically one of 2 options, to dispense with the condition altogether, to not have to screen, or to be allowed to plant it without displacing their fence seen in the photo. And for that to happen, it would have to be planted beyond their property line. The field that you see in the photo is not part of the subject property. It's an unimproved right-of-way that was never built as a street. The commission might remember this. This was called Joyce Way. And so the applicant would be open to planting the shrub outside of the property on the city right-of-way. And I'll mention, since it's probably on the minds of the commission, last month, The commission approved a development for next door. Looking at the photo, this would be a little more to the left, towards the east, the 1030 Young Street Apartments. And that developer is obligated to improve this unimproved right-of-way as a bicycle pedestrian path with landscaping. And that responsibility will be entirely on that developer. As far as the process, the staff report had a short analysis and findings section of how it meets applicable regulatory provisions, and more importantly, how it relates to what the commission approved last January. And something you don't see very often as a commission is the summary is that staff is recommending denial of both requests. And the reasons for the denial are across several of the next slides coming from the staff report. So the first is that there's basically just one stated argument in the materials the applicant provided that for Young Street in particular, those improvements, that they would be, quote, unnecessarily burdensome, unquote. But there was nothing more. There was no qualitative description, no dollar amounts, nothing quantitative, just that statement. Regarding the option to do a fee in lieu, which is allowed and spelled out in the development ordinance as an option for developers, the applicant indicated not wanting to pursue that option through staff, and so is wanting to neither construct the conditioned street improvements nor to pay the fee in lieu. And then speaking of money, the applicant's already bonded through the Public Works Department for the street improvements. That was necessary in order to secure issuance of the building permit that happened last June. The bond is a little over $200,000. That bond was premised on a contractor's construction estimate. And what's the word I'm looking for? Custom procedure for the city's public works when they collect a bond is it's based on the construction cost estimate, plus usually at least an additional 50%. The logic being that construction labor by private parties is cheaper than when it's constructed based on prevailing wage by public labor. If the city were to build the street itself as opposed to private contractors. And so working backwards from what the bond amount was, the estimated value would have been around $133,000. And compared to what the applicant reported as the project value, which is reported for all building permit applications, that value is only 9% of what the valuation of the project is, which I think was 1 point something million. Before there was even an application originally for the conditional use, during a pre-application conference, staff had informed the applicant verbally and in writing that Young Street improvements would be required by the development ordinance and conditioned. Coming up to the time of the hearing last January, for the staff report with this condition, the applicant did not contest the condition through testimony either ahead of the hearing or during the hearing. And then the Planning Commission itself didn't take any issue with the condition to improve Young Street. And then the applicant also did not choose to appeal the commission's decision to the City Council. And as one of the more final observations, the developer had already gotten accommodation of reducing construction costs of public improvements generally, because the approval also came with a variance, which was to avoid having to build half of a street in the Joyce Way right-of-way. And then lastly, the Public Works Department indicated no support for this modification of conditions request. Moving on to request number 2 about the shrubbery. So it's understandable why the request would have the shrubbery on the right-of-way, but the difficulties you might anticipate is that it would become the city's responsibility to maintain, namely to irrigate and prune it. And the applicant did offer in writing to maintain the shrubbery until that right-of-way is improved, but there's nothing that guarantees that Townsend Farms would actually do that. And because it's our right-of-way as a city, there'd be no legal basis for the city to attempt enforcement of that offer. There's also the observation that there's no particular reason for the city to take on implementing the screening condition that's required for in the form of the shrubbery. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, as far as Joyce Way itself, it's essentially going to be a linear park, thanks to the developer of 1030 Young Street. And the burden for that improvement is entirely on that developer. Townsend Farms is not contributing financially or in terms of construction at all to the linear park. And then lastly, the linear park itself that developer is going to make doesn't require any shrubbery. There'll be trees, a path, benches, that sort of thing. But there's no shrubbery required and none is anticipated by staff. So it'd be kind of awkward to try and make use of any shrubbery that developer might be proposing because there isn't any. And then as a last observation, Townsend Farms, the property being close to 1030 Young Street, received a notice of public hearing for the 1030 Young Street apartments. And there was no testimony by Townsend Farms asking that developer to take on the burden of the shrubbery. So in short, staff's review concludes that the modification of conditions application doesn't merit approval. And the recommendation by staff is that the commission deny the MOC application. And I'd be happy to take any immediate questions.
Did they complete their building?
As far as I know, no, because there's been no request yet for building inspectors and other city inspectors to come onto site and see construction.
So you can't just stop the building permit?
I'm not
Voided?
legal authority aside, I'm not sure there's a reason the city could, because the applicant met the requirements to get the permit. And it's up to them on their schedule within a reasonable amount of months to do the construction.
They met the requirement because they took out a bond.
Yes.
And then, so the bond is an agreement between the applicant and the city. It seems strange for this to come to the planning commission, how we could null and void the city's agreement with the applicant.
I agree. We thought that ourselves as staff, and I'd asked the applicant when they first made application to add a little more to their narrative to explain that situation, because the original narrative didn't mention that fact at all, the bond, and the revised narrative didn't really address the issue.
Well, for me, I agree with the staff report. Of anybody else?
We're still,
We can,
we're still.
we're still
Oh, I'm sorry.
taking
Oh my
testimony.
God, yes.
But are there any specific questions for staff on the presentation at this time? Okay. Hearing none, I would like to invite the applicant up to testify. And please state your name
Yep.
and your address for the record.
I pressed the
Welcome.
button to talk to you.
You won't have to, it's already on.
Okay. Hello. You guys hear me okay? I'm Tim Bobian. I'm from Triumph Specialty Construction. My address is 2132 Davison Road in Flint, Michigan, 48506. And I'm representing Townsend Farms for this agenda item. Hey, would you guys mind going back to your, the slide with the reasons for denial? So I just wanted to address each one by one.
Hang on just a moment.
Sure.
Yes.
It was just back a couple slides.
Yeah.
But I will address the one comment that the commission made while he's pulling that up, is the timing of how all these things is relevant to this discussion. When we originally started our application, which was in the later part of 2022, the staff had brought up a bunch of issues with our application that we started working through over a number of months. And when we finally got the application on the agenda for a planning commission meeting, which was about a year ago, we had now already missed the opportunity for the construction to happen in time for their growing season last summer. We missed it. And if we were to propose any modifications to our application with regards to the improvements along Young Street, or even if we had mentioned anything with the shrubbery on the east side of the property line, then staff was not going to support our approval for land use approval last January. And if we wouldn't have gotten approval last January, then we've also would have missed this growing season. So that would have been 2 growing seasons that we missed because of this application process. So at that point, we had no choice other than to agree with these items, or we would not have gotten land use approval and the project wouldn't move forward in the first place. So the reason that we did it in this order, it specifically has to do with your comment, which is why did it happen in this order?
It's because of the timing, because we were left with no choice last year other than agreeing to these items, or we wouldn't have been able to, or we would have had to miss a second growing season. So that's the reason for the timing and why we went about it in this manner. Now, with regards to the reasons for denial, there's a couple of different things I want to address. Can you just go back to the bullet points that you had there? Because I wanted to address each one of them. With part A here, with it being unnecessarily burdensome, that's with regards to the improvements along Young Street. When we first found out about these improvements along Young Street, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to do with a city plan of eventually widening Young Street. So that is really the root of this whole issue, which is Young Street ever going to get widened or not? Now, staff is putting this requirement on us because the intent by city plan is to widen Young Street. But if you look at Young Street, especially from the Townsend Farms property all the way back to the west towards downtown, you start to realize how unrealistic it is to actually widen Young Street. There are buildings in the way. There's all slew of issues that are happening on both sides of Young Street as you approach the downtown. And we brought these issues to staff during our first application, and they said, "Well, hey, that's not our call." But yet we're putting the burden on us to prepare for that widening of Young Street for this small little section. Although it's unrealistic to when you really look at Young Street that it's ever going to be widened. So in other words, we're widening it, or at least anticipating widening it for 200 feet of it, but there's 5,000 feet of it that is never going to be widened. It's unrealistic to even think that it's going to happen unless you're going to move buildings. So that's why we feel it's unnecessarily burdensome. With regards to fee in lieu, that was something that we discussed, but at the time that we discussed the fee in lieu, that we already realized that we had to agree to a bond, or we were never getting our building permit. So in other words, we were locked into this condition no matter what. Can you go to the next slide, please? With the bond being 9% of the value, I mean, the bond is really more than that because we had to get a bond for $200,000, not $133,000. So the bond is actually more than 9% of the value, but it is money that we feel is unnecessary. The frontage right now matches the frontage all the way up and down Young Street on both sides. And yet again, this project is being burdened with just improving this small little section. With regards to bullet point F, yes, staff did inform us of the required Young Street improvements, and like I addressed earlier, they weren't going to support us if we didn't approach it in this manner. The same with G. I mean, the staff was clearly not going to support us if we didn't agree to these when we were going through our land use approval. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, H is the same. We didn't contest it. I mean, that's all. It's regarding the same thing. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, wait, go back one, because the last one had to do with Joyce Way. With regards to K, if the commission remembers, we did have quite a lengthy discussion about what the city's intent was with regards to Joyce Way when we were here. Because we kept asking and inquiring about what the intent was with Joyce Way, because Joyce Way has been sitting there undeveloped for many, many years. And the commission had quite a few comments about this as well. And yes, we were giving a variance for not having to approve for the half of the construction for Joyce Way, but it was clear, even in the discussions that we had at the commission meeting at the time when we got approved, that the city did not intend to develop Joyce Way, as in fact, he even references the approval that the commission gave to the adjacent development, which is now we're turning it into a linear park, which has to do with the other item with regards to the trees along the east side, is what staff has actually asked us to do, and what the condition is with regarding the east side of the property is to move our fence off of our east property line 5 feet to the west, which now allows us to plant trees, which shades, which would then create that buffer along the east side. And all we're asking for is not move the fence, leave the fence where it's at, and plant the trees on the Joyce Way side, which is now going to be a park. So it makes more sense to us to leave the trees in the park side instead of putting it on our side. Especially when you consider what that does to our site. We're losing 5 feet of storage area, but also the main electrical feed from PGE comes right over that area. So now we're moving the fence on top of the PGE electrical feed, and we're putting the trees on top of the PGE electrical feed, when all of these trees could just be moved 5 feet to the east and still provide the same buffer. So essentially, from the street view, you're ending up with the same view. It's just an issue of a few feet. Are there trees on this side or the trees on that side? We have no problem with planting the trees. We'll even plant the trees, and as we offered, maintain the trees. But the 5 feet just seems unnecessary. It just seems like it doesn't really make sense for us to go through all of this trouble to put trees 5 feet to the east instead of to the west. Oh, that has to do with Public Works. Can we pull up our slide presentation now? Okay, you can go to the next slide. That's just the site. Let's see. Yeah, so you can see the whole site there. So you can go on to the next one. This slide was actually Colin and staff did a pretty good explanation of the situation. This was just explaining the situation. You can go to the next slide. Okay, you can go to the next one. Can you go to the first picture? We have a picture in here somewhere. Yeah. Okay, so this whole issue really boils down to two issues, which is one, the improvements along Young Street, and then the trees on the east side. As you can see, we just approximated this, but you can see if Young Street were to actually be widened the way that the staff has explained, you can see that in these orange lines is what the street would be widened to. Now you can see the difficulties that this would start to cause. I mean, just one property over, it's, their porches start to get cut off. We got some buildings in the way, and this situation actually continues all the way down the street. I mean, we didn't do every block, but we could do this for every block, and it just continues to get more cumbersome as you move down the street. So to us, it's unrealistic to think that Young Street is going to be widened anytime soon. And we're burdening this project not only from a timing perspective, but also from a cost perspective, in the fact that we're making us just go through this process for a hard little portion when there's clearly no intent, and it's kind of unrealistic to assume that this actually widening is going to happen all the way down. There's some serious things that are going to happen along Young Street to actually widen it out to what they're suggesting. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is just another view of it. You can see this is from the Towns and Farms property, which is to the left and actually looking towards downtown. You can see where those lines are and what in the disruption it starts to cause as this widening would continue its way downtown toward, we're heading towards the tracks into the downtown. You can see what difficulties would happen here. So we brought this up at during our first application process. And, never got a clear answer of what's the city's intent to do here, but you can see that the plan is unrealistic. It doesn't make sense. Can you go to the next slide, please? This is just another view. So on the left, this is a view looking down Towns and Farms property line which would be on the south side of Young Street, just looking down, and you can see where the line would head down, and you can see how close it is to that building, but it actually hits building as it goes further. And then the view on the right is on the other side, on the north side, same thing. Colin brought this picture up, so this is a duplicate, but our proposal is to leave this. The proposal, the recommendation from staff and the condition that was put on us is to take this out and put new landscaping in, which would involve moving the sidewalk a little further away, just a few more feet away from the curb. So we'd be taking this sidewalk out, putting another one in that was a couple of feet further south, planting trees between the sidewalk and the curb, and then taking these trees down and putting a new shrubbery and trees in along the fence line. And sure, we're doing a lot of work, but just seems unnecessary. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it's already buffered and this is already mature landscaping. Next slide, please. I think we had one along the east side. We have a picture along the east side. Keep going. Yeah. So this is actually the view of. This is on the east property line, but this is from the other side of the fence. Colin's picture was taken on the left side of the fence. We're on the right side of the fence now, and you can see the electrical transformer sitting back there. So if we move this fence 5 feet to the east, we're going to be kind of almost in line with that electrical transformer, which puts us, all of this work would then be right on top of the existing electrical feed that comes in here. So if we ever had a problem with this electric feed, or if PGE needs to make a modification, excuse me, then all of this work that we came out just gets ripped out. They do their work and then we have to put it all back again. Next slide, please. And then this is, Colin showed this picture. So we don't contest or have any problems with buffering this side. We just feel like moving the fence a few feet to do it is unnecessary. And that's it. Is that our last slide? Yeah, this is just what we're proposing. We discussed it already. Questions for me?
So do we have any questions for the applicant? Any of the commissioners online, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Not right now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Do we have anyone that wants to speak in favor of approving this modification? Do we have anyone that wants to speak in opposition of this proposal? Okay. Seeing none, there's no reason for a rebuttal. With that, any further questions for staff before I close for deliberations?
I do,
Okay,
and a couple of them. Question for the complex that's coming up just on the east side of them. Is that complex already, with the construction that they're doing, are they already setting themselves back? So are they going to be matching their current curb, or are they going to be set back for the future?
It's conditioned the same way, and that there'll have to be demolition of curb along 1030 Young Street, some additional asphalt, new curb, new planter strip and sidewalk, street trees.
And then the second one, with the question, and I know you had mentioned it, that there isn't any way like to enforce them future maintenance basically with the city. Is there any way of being able to enforce something like that, or is that just like not?
There probably wouldn't be a very functional way to do that, given that this is public. The property that where the trail it will be located between this property and the one to the east is a public right of way. If it was a park property, it might be a little bit more feasible because you could have a maintenance agreement with, easement type obligations that are attached to a parcel of property. But having a private party assume maintenance of a right-of-way like something in the right-of-way would be much more difficult. And it's not something that we would have a practice of accepting here at the city.
Okay. Thank you.
If I may, I wanted to add a clarification too. Regarding the front yard, where the applicant was talking about trees. No, those are actually very woody, hardy shrubs. And even with the right-of-way dedication and improvements, new sidewalk, there's no functional reason that those shrubs would have to be removed. There's enough room for them to stay.
Can I ask a question about the right-of-way going down Young Street towards the west? The applicant showed several pictures proposing that it was going to start cutting off people's porches and buildings. Is that the intent, or is it only happening here in this spot and the one to the east because there's going to be changes to the current development?
This is Colin. Essentially, it is the latter.
Thank you.
Okay, so if I allow the applicant to speak, I will give people the same opportunity again because I haven't closed the hearing yet. Would you like to hear from the applicant?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, I will let you speak. So. Because we have not closed the hearing yet.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to respond because we weren't part of the approval process for the adjacent development, but my understanding is that the Joyce Way is now not really going to be Joyce Way. It's going to be this linear park. So is the city going to maintain the trees and the shrubbery or whatever is going to be planted in that area? Is that what's going to happen?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so it's actually still going to be city property. It's just going to be it's still going to be the right of way, and the city's going to maintain the grass and the trees that are in that area.
Yes.
Okay, so if we were to plant trees in that area, then the city is at least expecting that we would take over the maintenance of that area. Currently, the way that Joyce Way sits, Townsend Farms has been maintaining Joyce Way for years. Mowing the grass, making sure that there's nothing there, years. And now that we want to plant some, I guess he's calling them shrubbery. What are we calling what's going happening along the east line? Is it shrubbery or trees?
I was talking about the north shrubs
Yeah, I
along
know.
the street.
Along the east property line, are you proposing trees or shrubbery? What terminology are you
The
using?
existing condition requires only shrubbery, no trees.
Okay, so shrubbery. So now shrubbery in this linear park seems to make more sense than shrubbery over the top of our PGE line that comes in to our facility. That just seems to make more sense to me. And we've offered to maintain that, but the city just feels like it's not a guaranteed situation. The second thing is that with the widening of Young Street, we don't have an issue with participating in widening in Young Street, especially when you look at, we've already moved the right of way over. Like we've already given up more space to allow for it to happen. It just appears, not only through the approvals that we have here, but also visually appears that Joyce Way isn't going to be widened anytime soon. And we've proposed many times in conversations and in this forum that we'll participate in the widening of Young Street. It just doesn't feel like it's going to happen anytime soon. So we're moving a small chunk of it, but we're only moving this much of a big picture here, and buildings have to move. Setbacks are going to have to be adjusted. There's going to be a lot of things involved with with widening Young Street, which we have no problem with. Just seems unnecessary to do it now. Now, it's not just moving curbs and sidewalks and shrubs and trees. This is utilities. There's an overhead power line that has to be sent out now underground. There's a gas line. There's fiber. There's things underground that are also being moved as well. And we're moving them just, I guess, for this idea that at some point Young Street's going to be widened, and you can even visually, if you drive down there, you can see it's going to be really, really tough to widen that anytime soon. But when you're ready, we'll play our part.
Does anyone else at this moment want to speak in favor? Does anyone want to speak in opposition? All right, hearing none. Does anyone on the commission have a question for staff?
And Colin, as the applicant's trying to visualize and point, do you have a test as to, is it feasible to expand? Do we have plans? What's your guys' take on that, on his comment?
The purpose of the condition comes from the fact that the city has a transportation system plan, which has a number of diagrams or figures. And one of them indicates what are called functional classes of street, basically minor local streets versus major thoroughfares. And as you might expect, the major thoroughfares are wider in their terms of the right of way and the roadway. And Young Street is designated such that it requires wider right of way and wider roadway than exists today. That's the short answer.
And so the growth of the city has something to do with the amount of traffic that's on it. Is that what determines how soon changes are made?
Well, thinking back to 2019, that's when the new transportation system plan was adopted by the council. A number of factors went into it. One would be connectivity of streets. The other would be which streets would be enough of a through route through town and would be expected to carry more traffic than other streets. And Young Street is one of those streets.
I have a question. Don't know if it's more for Colin or even for Chris. I understand how fee in lieu works for the streets. That is still an option that was an approved option within the conditions, right? They can either make the improvements or do a fee in lieu. That is still their choice, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. When it comes to the shrubbery on Joyce Way, is fee in lieu an option there?
It's not anticipated because that shrubbery is already outside the right of way. And even with the widening of the right of way, it's still outside of it. So it's on private property. It's not a public thing.
So if, maybe I'm not being clear. I know that what we're asking is to move the fence back. So shrubbery will be on the outside of the fence, right? I think we all agreed that putting shrubbery on the side of the fence that nobody's going to see is kind of weird. So I understand why we would want them to move the fence and put it in the front. I get that. If they didn't want to, or if we agreed not to move the fence and gave them the option of fee in lieu, could the city accept the fee in lieu and put that money towards maintenance of that strip? Is my question.
You got me right to the maintenance part. So,
Okay.
we
Because
could do
maintenance
it
is a
for,
big thing.
we could do it for, so we accept fees in lieu for, say, street trees and different things, right?
Mhm.
So, and we could certainly do that for, say, shrubbery or some other kind of landscaping that was going in the right of way. But again, I think the maintenance issue is a little bit different. The fact is, if it's in the right of way, the unimproved right of way,
Once it
it's
dies,
ours.
us.
That's correct.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for staff? Okay, sounds like we don't. Are we ready to deliberate? Can I get at least some looks that we're ready to talk about it? All right, I'm going to close this for testimony and we can now deliberate.
So I'll go ahead and start. And I know that it seems quite impossible and that it seems very far away that Young Street will be widened, but being on the commission now for about a couple of years, I know that these things take a long time. And we've seen that there are houses, like partial good amounts of a house that are like in, again, future planned streets and right of ways. And so, it's just a matter of basically waiting and seeing when things get developed to be able to kind of really expand on those. So I really understand that. And I do, in some ways for that instance, kind of see a fee in lieu definitely being a better option, especially since they said that they're willing to play their part, which the fee in lieu is basically doing that, right? Playing their part for when the work will get done. I do definitely kind of wish I would have heard a little bit more, like when they first came in and applied, that they didn't want to move some of these things around, or that they were having some of these discussions as well. Because in some ways, saying that they need that for them to be able to get their permits, they were going to have to accept. But the thing is, if knowing you're needing the permits, obviously that needs to be set up front, and had it been agreed to. Otherwise, we, like you said, he would have missed another harvest season as well. And we would just been in the
I
same
just
place.
look at, Young Street will definitely be widened. I mean, it's the growing pains of a city that's been growing rapidly. There's no doubt it's going to happen. We widen streets every year.
Yeah, I was thinking of Hayes Street. We had to take a lot of, we had to take a lot of people's driveways and it was kind of a pain, but it seems impossible, but I'm putting faith in the city that we've done our due diligence to know that it's possible. And I get what you're saying. I get what the applicant's saying as well, as it just looks impossible, but I think, it's not my job to figure that out. I'm just hoping that due diligence has been done and I seen it in my neighborhood. And so that's why I'm having a tough time following that vision that I guess it's hard to see and I get it, but I think it can be done. So.
Commissioner Lassen or Commissioner Bartel, do you have? We can't hear you, Commissioner Lassen. Nope, we still can't hear you. Can you type, if you want to type a comment in the chat, I will ask Colin to read it. In the meantime, Commissioner Bartel, do you have something?
Sure. Based on Colin's response to my question about the plans for when and how Young Street might be widened, I do understand that you have to start somewhere, and starting with the new changes to the development that happen to be right next to each other is as good a place as any to start. I think it remains to be seen how it may or may not play out continuing down Young Street to the west.
Colin, do we have any comments from Commissioner Lassen?
If there are any, they have not appeared yet.
Okay.
Looks like he's typing.
Yeah.
So I will make my comments then, or my part of the deliberation. I do remember this application coming before us, and I do remember spending a lot of time deliberating on Joyce Way. I was really for allowing the applicant not to have to make the improvements on the street, what I call the street to nowhere. So I know that we had already very carefully went through that and thought of that. A lot of that discussion is what subsequently led to the conditions for the property next to it, because we thought that the buffer between the two would better serve the community as a green space than as a street, literally to nowhere, where we didn't ask for the bike lanes and the extra easements and things along that line, or the improvements to halfway across the street. So I do remember this, and we deliberated with a lot of forethought, and this is how the commission works. We had this come to us, and based on what we decided here, we had another project come before us, and based on what that project is, we had another one. So there's actually 3 properties. The one right on the corner of 99 and Young, and then the one that hasn't been built yet, then the one that came before us like last month, and this one. And so while yes, I do agree that it looks like there will be a problem widening Young Street. I remember Hayes Street. I remember 5th Street. I remember every time we try to widen a street, it's painful. It's growing pains, and it's expensive for all parties. But 5th Street came out really well.
Yeah.
No matter how, I remember how contentious that particular one was. And then Hayes Street, the improvements on Hayes Street has made that street safer for the community and has done well. Young Street is another property or another street in the city that, as long as I've lived here, we've talked about making improvements on Young Street. I know we've had to improve infrastructure, things like that. So unfortunately, I'm going to agree with the rest of the commission that this is part of the growing pains. I'm struggling a little bit with the moving of the fence.
Yeah, me too.
However, I do understand the maintenance. We're asking for this, and we're asking for something to happen on private property, and if we acquiesce and say that's okay, then the city has to pay for it, and it comes out of all of our pockets. I understand where the applicant might not want to have it all coming out of their pocket, but if we say, yeah, don't worry about it, then we all have to pay for it. It's a difficult decision to make, and we don't make these lightly. We try to look at what's best for the community overall. You know, I don't always say no to things that I'd like to say no to because it's what's best for the community. You know, I used the example when I was on the city council. I had to say yes to sewer rates increases. I didn't want my sewer rates to go up, but I knew that it was what was best for the community. So when I deliberate, I think about what's best for the community, what's our long range plans, what are our long range goals. And so I'm done on my soapbox. Colin, have we seen anything from Commissioner Lassen?
Still no chat.
Okay. Commissioner Lassen, did you want to participate? Do you have something to say? Or are you ready to move forward with a vote with thumbs up, thumbs down?
I think he's typing.
I had a question, are we able to condition maybe a different type of fence, something more appealing, since we are going to have the other property improve that parties? I mean, this picture obviously does it to one, and so, and I understand the applicant's concern, and I feel like, is it even possible? You know, I just don't know if that, are we asking something that, so is there another, can we improve the fencing? Can we increase the height of the fence here? Can we do something a little bit more appealing, since we are going to have it into a park that is going to be maintained?
Maybe do a fence or a wall in lieu
In
of.
lieu of, leave it where it's at,
landscaping.
but maybe increase it by something nicer and higher.
I like that idea, especially probably the idea of a wall, because again, they tend to be a little bit higher. And then just, again, that visual appeal.
Yeah.
And I agree that if the other properties doing all of that, updating, as part of their
Actually, a
condition.
wall would be a good thing between these two properties.
Yeah,
This one's
Just, I mean, I don't know if that's what we
Residential.
can, but just a thought.
I believe we could make a motion that either the conditions stand as is, or the applicant has the option to do a,
Modification.
of what kind of modification? I mean, because our WGO says we need the landscaping. There is a fence.
Madam Chair, staff, regarding the shrubbery on the east side, staff has a plan B that we can distribute and put on screen if it would
Okay.
help you discuss. Okay. Okay. First, I'll route paper copies and then I'll bring it on the screen.
Thank you. Really are trying to be as reasonable as we can and still maintain what's in the best interest of the city as a whole. Well, that's what I meant by fee in lieu.
I think I.
Oh, yes.
I don't understand that.
I do. That was, again,
All right. So on the screen, you do see under regarding request 2 in the shrubbery, item D. The basic idea is The commission would let the applicant plant the shrubbery in the Joyceway right of way and just give us a one-time fee towards general maintenance.
That's what I meant by fee in lieu.
I understand now. That's what you're getting at. It's just, I'm sorry, fee in lieu has a very specific meaning for us staff, but now I understand what you were trying to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you shared this option with the applicant?
No, they're also seeing it for the first time.
Okay.
What are
We-
our options with this now that we've seen this and the applicant is seeing it for the first time? How do we somehow
We closed the hearing for testimony. I don't even know.
Yeah.
If I would have to. Okay. Excuse me. I'm going to need help from our council because we have closed the hearing. And if I want to ask the applicant a question about whether or not they would be willing to accept this, what do I need to do?
If you want to ask the applicant specifically, then I would recommend reopening the public hearing to get their comments on, this additional, alteration to the condition, since it's not something that they have proposed. And it's not, based off of our recommendation for denial this evening.
And other than tapping my gavel and saying, I'd like to reopen the hearing, is there anything else that needs to take place?
No, that's it.
I'd like to reopen the hearing at this time and ask the applicant to step forward.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Margaret Townsend from Townsend Farms, and I happen to be in California, and my husband and I could not attend. I would like to ask Colin to put the slide up of the fence on the east side where he wanted it moved to show what's in our storage yard. Can he do that, please?
I believe
Stand by.
that is in the applicant's presentation.
It's in both. Colin showed it and so did we. Thank you, Colin. So my question, after 70 years of that look in the city that employs many occupants who live in the city, what is wrong with that look? Why does the city, Colin especially, why do you not like that look? It brings money into homes. I'm just curious. I know there's graffiti on the fence. We try to take care of it every year. I see that. But from when we have maintained this field to the east of us for over 20 years, 20, 30 years, we've maintained that field. Never asked for a cent from anybody. And we have this look that keeps all the flats together, all the barrels together, and all the our plant manager down there keeps that so neat and clean. We have pest control that keeps out the rats that come from who knows where from the city. I don't know where. It's not from us. And I just want to know what's wrong with that look. Why is this such a big deal? That's going to cost us a fortune, or it could cost the city. I just don't understand. There's such a short area there. And we do not want to move that fence over the PGE line. I think everybody on this board would say that is not a reasonable solution. And move our vault. That doesn't even make sense. We have been so cooperative with the city forever. And now we just have to deal with putting shrubbery. Shrubbery's not going to cover those barrels and those flats and those pallets. There's going to, how tall are you going to say that has to be? It just doesn't make sense. We could put a taller fence up there. I'm not going to pay for a brick wall. I'm not in Mexico or the United States. I'm not paying for that. I can put a taller fence with barbed wire. Is that the look you want? Somebody needs to explain to towns and farms what's wrong with this look and what look is it that you are so desperate for? This is very upsetting to us. And we are willing to do anything for the city when it's ready. The property to the west of us, those people are going to end up with like a 5-foot deck off the front of their home, their patio. If that's the way the city's going to run it and just chop off, I get driveways. I understand you take off some driveways, but to actually take off the fronts of somebody's porch that isn't even that old of a complex. I think everyone, before this is decided on, every single one of you guys have to walk it and bring a video camera and walk it.
Okay.
Colin, lead the charge. I'm sorry, but
No,
pretty upsetting.
thank you. I thank you for your testimony. We've listened to you and I do appreciate it. I believe right now we are looking at a solution that would make sense for both sides. I believe your representative here has seen the proposal and I'd like to get some perspective from him, if you
Yeah,
wouldn't mind. I don't mean to cut you off, but.
Yeah, I was asking, can we just have a few moments because we're reading through it right now? We just saw it. So I'm not
So-
trying to delay the commission, but we're just. reading
I
it.
am going to take a 5-minute recess so that you can read it and maybe discuss with your client.
Okay, that'd be.
And we can take
Can you
a
put
minute.
it? Can Colin put that back up?
Yeah,
on
can
the
you
screen
put it on the
so
screen?
we can
Because
look at it?
Mike Townsend and Margaret Townsend are online, so they could see it as well.
Right.
Thank
Thank you so much. So I am going to take a
Thank
5-minute
you.
recess,
Thank you.
during which time, commissioners, you should not be deliberating at all. Thank you.
No, just thinking.
Thank you. It's much better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody else.
Am I allowed to ask the staff a question though about?
When we come back, so that we all.
In this?
We need to ask those questions so that everybody can get it. There's something that's not only for the great entities.
All right.
I realized I should have snapped on something.
It's like speedy.
Oh, no, see, I didn't even, it did not mean.
No. I looked at this over the weekend. It's gonna be a long day.
See, for me, my brother said he was gonna come home, so he was gonna make something. I don't know. I'm just like, I will save it, and I didn't think about it anymore, and now I'm regretting it. I have no idea.
No, not this one.
It is getting warm.
Yes, thank you.
I feel,
I call
He's got a really good.
I thought he could. He was good. This happened like I thought he was a little bit more interesting. Not very.
Should have snacked before coming.
I know, they think it's weird.
They really should give us report of this. So we need a, maybe there's no recommendations.
I'm trying to reach her. All right.
Item number 2.
I'm sorry, I can't see that at all. Did you try, is there a phone number on there? Try calling. If you're looking at something, you get a word. So, there's always one. Yeah, and to get that, you call, you talk on the phone. Alternatively, I can probably. Very good, very good.
The last page.
How'd you do that?
Bring something to run my map from my own.
Yeah, no kidding. So what I don't know is where in here, you can't tell me where in here it says what you. That's all. I want to make a motion, but I don't know where to start. I mean, it's on page 3. Normally it's set out.
Yeah.
That's not. It says towns and one narrative, maybe that is new. Oh.
And the one things are just cut and dry. And the one things are just cut and dry. That's the kind of mindset I had when we. Well, that case. Well, that's not how you want it. Get me in there.
Yeah. Feel like I have to be low down. Mary and
I appreciate that.
Well, so happening. I don't feel like I'll be able to do stuff. I'm actually against. I think it's a small place where you just, if you see it, that's charming. Not teachers all over.
There's definitely an.
We have found. Oh, to Chris, Lassett.
No, that, I'm okay with that, but we've got Chris last week and Attorney Chris.
For an ordinary, because my background was actually tourism, special events, educational background. And then also education. When I have work.
Okay.
Okay. If the other number in the call that code is right. I think old school. Come on here.
Try.
Because he can see and hear. He just can't talk.
Perfect.
I do know the teacher.
Yeah. Friday.
And
Open the other, open that.
he has asked, well, they was an integration. School board, they're kindly asking what the time commitment was. Ready for it, and I actually, so, that would be okay. Yeah. I never wanted to get paid, so.
Yeah.
Are we about ready to get started again? Are we ready to get started again? Oh, he is trying, okay. I see him, I wasn't sure. Okay. Okay.
Well, that's the thing is finding what and the.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's the one thing.
Yeah, and then here's the thing about how to make the place. It's like the things to, and then actually, even if it's. I mean, silver dish is considered.
Well, we've got two.
But it's sort of like the gateway town, even though there's a shop to silver balls. Apart, what is it? The stadium.
It's really close. And leave the door.
They're all, yeah. They're. Closer. To the first.
Right.
Yeah, you know, and stuff, take it back. And when you, it's one of the things that you just have to pick. I don't know the history. Right. But that's, like, again, it's those things that take a long time and it's planning and then just kind of being patient. That, you know, you work towards improvements and having this plan.
Make sure you brush your teeth before you go to bed.
And it was, I didn't realize that. Scott Erickson. I see it.
Like he's dialing.
I don't know, and I don't have that background necessarily.
Yeah, but it's really.
But it's also
the good visual. It's we've already. Years ago. Things.
Okay.
So these questions.
Right, would you mind stepping? Well, it looks like everyone from the hallway is funneling back in.
We got walked out toward the fence.
Feel it.
We stepped outside and the door locked.
Oh, everybody did it. Right. Wow. Welcome back from the recess.
Thank you.
Like to ask the applicant, have you had a chance to discuss with your client or,
We did, yes.
all right.
So has the commission reviewed all of these and all of these options are in play?
Right now, we are discussing the option related to the shrubbery.
Okay, so that was option D.
D,
D is in dog.
D is in dog.
We would be agreeable to option D.
Are we, are we
So,
working again?
Because we already have it defined on the plan.
Bring us back in.
We can go in now.
yes, we're dialed in now and then,
Oh, okay.
because we've reopened, we can ask questions of staff
Okay,
or anyone.
I had a question. Where can I find in the materials concise description of what the applicant wanted?
Regarding this east side shrubbery,
Pardon?
regarding the east side shrubbery specifically,
Well, to make a motion, I want to modify it now. Where would I find everything you wanted? Is it on
No.
page 3 of the staff report at the top?
you're talking about a motion, and I think I know what you're aiming at. I have a slide for this scenario. I can bring that
Oh,
up and
okay.
see if that's what you're looking for.
Okay.
Give me just a moment.
Looking for that.
So to answer your chair, question, Commissioner Corning, I think the slide on the screen is kind of what you're after. And I believe if you're interested in option D, having the commission approve that, then you would essentially say the approval would be for request 2. That's what the first blank is for. With the condition of approval, letter D is in dog.
Somebody else will have to make it. I don't understand what that says.
I got it.
You do?
That's-
Okay, good.
So now,
I'm-
that portion that we're talking about is related to the shrubbery along the fence Joyce Way, for lack of a better term. So when we had talked about, right now the condition is need to move the fence, plant the shrubberies on the other side of it. We can say that's how it was approved and that's the hard line we're going to take. We've had a lot of discussion and one of the discussions was, is there something we could do that would allow the developer to plant shrubs on the other side of the fence, not move the existing fence? And the concern was that there's no provision for maintenance. If they move the shrubbery to the other side of the fence, it's now city property. And there was some concern about maintenance. One of the questions I asked was something to the effect of, could we do some sort of fee of lieu where the shrubbery gets planted, the developer pays a fee and the city maintains that property. Staff had considered that and there is a suggestion, and that is the detail D. And to me, I'm looking at this and to me, it makes sense. Okay, we don't have to move the fence. We don't disrupt the transformer. We don't disrupt the sidewalk. We plant shrubs on the outside of the fence, which should help take care of the graffiti problem, right? Because it's really hard to paint on the fence if there's a big old bush in front of it. we're going to ask, we've done some calculations, or staff has done some calculations that seem pretty reasonable. We're going to ask the developer to pay a one-time fee towards the future maintenance of those shrubs. You've had a chance to look at D and
Yes, we
the
reviewed,
applicant.
I've reviewed option D with Townsend Farms and they are agreeable to option
Okay.
D. Yes.
So when we make a motion, we could make a motion that we recommend the request with that particular part, E. That's for the portion
But there
related
are
to the
two
fence.
sections to their
That'll be a
request.
second.
Right. So that's the second part. We were also discussing the, and I feel, and please, other commissioners, let me know if I am incorrect. It feels like the commission feels at least somewhat in unison that option D, for the second part, does make sense. And so if we make a
Yes.
motion, we would make a motion that says, okay, we like section D. We haven't come to any kind of consensus or feeling, or I don't have a feeling exactly on the portion of the discussion related to the street improvements on Young Street, the sidewalks,
I think that should be denied.
That's requested by.
and that's where we're at now. We're just gonna discuss that part.
Yeah, I agree.
Chair Ellsworth,
Close.
Yes.
apologies. I think if the commission's gonna continue, on a
Deliberation.
deliberative process,
Need to
you
close.
should reclose the public
Okay,
hearing.
I will do that.
So just see if the applicant has any other comments.
Before I get to that closed part, I'm just trying to tell you where we're going. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant? On either part, because it's now open.
And if I could, Madam
Yes.
Chair, I have Commissioner Lassen, who I could probably get us to chime in if he had a question as well.
Okay. Does he have any questions?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Yeah. While we're still open, and since I've given the applicant time to speak, is there anyone else in the room that wants to speak in favor of this proposal? Anyone else that wants to speak in favor at this time? Okay. So now I need to give the same opportunity for anyone that wants to speak in opposition. Is there anyone that has anything in opposition or neutrality? Okay. Hearing no opposition, there's no need for any kind of rebuttal. I believe that before I close this hearing, does the commission have any other questions for the applicant or staff on either portion? Because once I close it, I don't want to open it again. Okay. Hearing no questions from the commission, no other testimony, it looks like from the public, I'm going to close this part and we're going to start deliberating again. Okay. So are we all,
I thought,
does anyone want to discuss the portion of the MOC related to the shrubbery on along Joyce Way?
I think we're all in agreement that this is good.
Okay. So now, just because it's easier, let's deliberate about the Young street improvements, sidewalks, curbs, the whole bit.
we already have two properties that will be developed just east of it that are gonna include that. So if they wanna do it themselves or be in lieu, I mean, I think I was gathering from our previous discussion that we were all seeing that, again, while it seems difficult to envision it, In some cases, it definitely is that due diligence for the future of Woodburn and the plans that have been set out already.
Okay. Any other comments?
I agree.
I would agree.
And let's try to see if Commissioner Lassen has any comments.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. So if I could paraphrase. We are denying the portion, or the
One.
applicant has the
Request one.
Request.
request one, the applicant has the option, as was in the original condition, of fee in lieu or make the improvements. That option is still on the table, and that is still with the applicant. We are not going to approve any. We are not going to, yeah,
Are we ready?
Let's see. Do you want to do it? Are you okay? Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
So I motion to approve application, modification of conditions 23-03, request 2, with conditions of approval on letter D. And staff recommends in the January 11 addendum memo, and also to deny request 1.
okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
I
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Chris. You're okay.
at this time, I would like to open the public hearing DR 23-09, the Salute Medical Center renovation at 1175 Mount Good Avenue. This is a design review application to construct a 129 square foot front vestibule entryway to the pharmacy area and an expansion of the existing parking lot. The project also includes significant interior work to the existing building. A street adjustment application is included to request a modified cross-section for Mount Good Avenue. A variance application is also included with request not to meet standards related to street improvements, street trees, perimeter screening, and on-site exterior lighting. This is design review 23-09, SA 23-07, and variance 23-07. With that, I will ask, this is again, we are still looking at quasi judicial. And so I will ask if there has been any ex parte contact with the applicant or site visits.
This is Deb, Commissioner Bartel, and I work right next door. I run a medical clinic in between the two Salute and Pacific Pediatric clinics that are run, that are part of the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Group. So I am there all day, every day.
And is there anything that would
I think there could be a perceived conflict of interest. I feel I could be neutral, but I also understand if folks would like for me to step aside. I'm happy to be part of it, or I'm happy to not participate.
Okay, any other ex parte site visits that need to be declared?
I'll say for myself, I drive by there. I live fairly nearby, so I usually do that little exit from Park onto 214. So.
And would that preclude you from being able to be fair and impartial listening to the testimony?
I don't think so.
Okay. Do we have any challenges from the public? Hearing none, would you please read the hearing statement for us?
Both Oregon law and the Woodburn Development Ordinance govern evidentiary quasi-judicial land use hearings and require that the commencement of the hearing, a statement be read to all persons in attendance. The applicable substantive criteria for this land use decision are listed in the staff report and are as follows. Woodburn Development Ordinance 1.04.03, 2.03, 2.06, 3.01 through 3.07, 3.11, 4.01, 4.02, 5.01.02, 5.03.03, and 5.03.12. The hearing will proceed in the following general order: staff report, applicant's presentations, testimony in favor of the application, testimony in opposition to the application, rebuttal, closure of the record, deliberation, and decision-making. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria just stated or other criteria in a plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party wanting a continuance or to keep the record open must make that request while the record is still open.
Thank you. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, thank you, Gerald. This is Dan Handel, planner with the city. And we are looking at the Salud Medical Center property. They are in for a type 3 land use application package. It includes design review, street adjustment, and variance. We're here tonight because type 3 applications involve a public hearing before the Planning Commission, and the commission will issue a decision. So I'll enter the staff report and its attachments into the record. I also want to bring into the record a memo I emailed out that was on January 9th with some proposed modifications to certain conditions. I'll go more into that more in detail later. That is on your dais up front there. And then I also have another item to enter into the record. That's a piece of testimony we received from Mr. Walt Griffiths. He's the property owner for the self-storage development adjacent to the west. And you also have a copy of that in front of you, and that was emailed out to you earlier as well. So we are here on Mount Hood Avenue, just east of the Front Street overpass. The police department is right across the street to the south. And we have that self-storage development here. PGE has an office to the east, and then there's a construction company maintenance shop building to the north. This property is in the commercial office zone, and it's a little peculiar. It's surrounded by industrially zoned properties to the east, north, and west, and then across the street it is a residential area. This is the current little more zoomed in view of the property. And the applicant's proposal tonight is a pretty thorough renovation inside and out. They are proposing to expand their parking lot by 39 spaces. Mainly that's in front here, closer to the street. So a pretty substantial change to the flow of how drivers will navigate the parking lot there. They are proposing a second an additional driveway onto Mount Hood Avenue. That's closer towards the self-storage development to the west. They're proposing a small addition right here in this gold circled area. That is about 129 square feet. It's a new entryway into the pharmacy for the building. And then before I go on, this is an image of what that entryway would look like. And in addition to that work, there's substantial work inside the building, just updating paint, flooring, lighting, some layout changes, etc. Besides a few requests that I'll go through in just a moment, the proposal does meet our development code requirements or can through conditions of approval. So the first request is related to the street frontage along Mount Hood Avenue. That's an ODOT facility. It's a major arterial in our transportation system plan. And this is our standard cross section for what's anticipated for this street. You can see from the aerial right below it, doesn't quite line up. The pavement's not quite wide enough to support all 4 travel lanes plus the center turn lane. And then there's a curb tight sidewalk rather than having that landscape strip then the sidewalk. And staff is supportive of the street adjustment request that the applicant's proposing to maintain the curb tight sidewalk and not widen the roadway. This being an ODOT facility, ODOT was very intentional in how they allowed this portion to be designed. You can see in the background of the aerial image here, or the street view image, excuse me, this is the Front Street overpass. So a little bit further east, kind of looking behind this street view, the highway starts to taper down and become slimmer. So if you go further east towards Highway 99E, it actually does look more like this. But as we approach this this overpass here, the street actually starts to get slimmer as it goes under the bridge there. That was very intentional design decision by ODOT. Frankly, I don't think they would even approve a permit to widen the street here. And then separately for the sidewalk, you can see there's a pretty substantial grade change as well as some mature trees along the frontage there. So relocating that sidewalk to plant new street trees in a landscape strip would result in likely removal because of the significant damage to the root system, these existing mature trees. So kind of counterintuitive to what the cross section would be, what would be the standard requirement there. So staff's supportive of the request. There's also a few variance requests made. First being to not plant street trees along that Mount Hood Avenue frontage. Those existing mature trees are actually on private property. So they would need to plant those street trees on that slope, that dirt slope there. So they're requesting not to do that. That's this kind of this green area right here. One, safety issues with trees growing kind of sideways that would lean over the highway as they grow, that being a safety issue. Also, work being done in that slope area to put in those trees and may impact those existing mature trees there. So we are supportive of that request. I'll go into a little more detail about that in just a second. There's a second request here associated with required screening along the perimeter. So because this property abuts industrial zones on the 3 sides here. Our code requires an architectural wall, like a cement block wall, for that perimeter as a screening method. On the west and most of the north property boundaries, there is already a wall. The remaining red portion here is a chain link fence. And I'll go into a little more detail on that in just a second. Just running through these requests for you. The next request, these blue circles here are existing light poles. Last summer, or I guess summer 2022 now, the city updated the development code to limit pole heights for parking lots in commercial and industrial areas. These specific poles here exceed that height limit. And they are requesting to maintain the poles. They would swap out the fixtures to be ones that are shielded to reduce light pollution, but they just are simply requesting to keep the existing poles there. There's also a couple variances being requested to maintain prior commission-approved variances. One related to a couple site or parking lot setback encroachments. So you can see this kind of dark hashed area here and here. We have a 5-foot minimum setback for parking areas. These 2 spots just kind of slightly encroach into that setback. Commission approved that variance back in 2003, and they're requesting to maintain that variance. And then Commission also approved more recently in 2019 a sign variance to allow a second small monument sign near the driveway, just kind of like a directional sign for folks to better see the driveway and identify the site. So they're requesting to maintain those. And staff's supportive of all 5 of the requests, and kind of go into a little more detail about why we're supportive. So specifically for those light poles, the existing blue light poles here, they're mainly towards the back of the property, pretty far away from the street frontage and the residential area beyond it. Between that and the grade change from the street to the property and all the existing trees and landscaping on site already, likely no impact to keep those poles there. So staff's supportive of it, seems reasonable. For the screening along the east property line, there's an existing chain link fence there. We haven't received any testimony or indication from PGE that they have a concern with that fence remaining, or if there's any issues. And the applicant, through their landscape plan, is proposing a substantial amount of landscaping along this property boundary, in addition to keeping that fence there. So just supplementing that screen with more landscaping. And they did mention to staff that if they were required to put in that wall, some of the existing trees may be impacted along that property line. So it seems a fair trade-off, getting more landscaping, and there's already that fence to adequately buffer the 2 properties. And then regarding the street trees along the front of the property, the applicant, as part of the proposal to not plant those street trees, they are providing an increased landscaping for the site. Wanted to just point out briefly here, the proposal is almost doubling the amount of landscaping that's required. And specifically along the site frontage here, here are these existing mature trees that they're going to be preserving. They would be enhancing that and making that kind of slope. Right now, it doesn't really look that great. They'd be enhancing that with a variety of shrubbery, ground cover, improving aesthetics, and also helping with any soil erosion there. So staff is supportive of that variance as well. Pretty much covers it. Approval with conditions is the recommendation. There's a couple conditions about just ensuring compliance with certain requirements. There's a condition in there about tree preservation. We are recommending a condition to have them perform some slight maintenance work on this crosswalk here in front of their frontage. You can see this is a Google Street View from June 2023, so fairly recent. There's portions of the crosswalk where striping's been worn away. There's bollards here that are missing. They may have been hit by cars or something. So just some general maintenance to make it more visible. We have a condition for the applicant to provide a fee per new additional parking space that would go towards development of an anticipated employer shuttle that the transit agency will be seeking to implement as part of the recently adopted transit plan that council adopted last year. And then we're also proposing several restrictions for that second driveway. We are recommending that it be a right out only driveway. That was actually ODOT's justification for agreeing to it. And then limiting the width of that driveway to be 12 feet. So it would be a single lane exit only driveway. And then briefly, I do want to just touch base on the memo that I sent out. So several of the conditions, as they were provided when the staff report was published last week, recommended due date for certain things to be prior to building permit issuance. That's pretty standard for what we require. After publishing the staff report, we met with Public Works staff as well as the applicant to discuss it a little further. And we're comfortable changing that to be prior to final inspection. In this case, the applicant seeks to maintain operations during all this work. I'm sure they'll go into it further when they present, but just for logistical reasons of kind of phasing the work that they're doing on site while also maintaining operations, it would just allow them some more flexibility to make this change. And we're comfortable with that. So that's what I got. Any questions?
Could we see your one of your first slides? It was an aerial view of the neighborhood.
This one?
Well, I was trying to see, I wanted to see the driveway of the storage facility and how the
How
driveway.
close they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. That letter we got said that the storage facility would be crowded. I just was trying to see if there's any. Yeah,
It's right, it starts
Oh, wow.
right here.
that is close. Okay.
And I believe the proposed driveway would be right in between these two trees.
Okay.
Space to minimize the amount of damage to the trees. Again, this is an ODOT facility. So ultimately they are the permitting body that would allow this type of driveway. And one of their, I guess, conditions for supporting it thus far was to limit it to exiting only, going westbound. So a right out only. And that would be sufficient for them to approve it. And staff's fine with that.
Thank you.
Dan, I have a question about the side, I'm sorry, the crosswalk improvements you mentioned. Are they
Yeah.
even allowed, are they allowed to do that because it's ODOT and or Marion County that are supposed to maintain that roadway? Is it okay for them to make those changes that you're requesting?
It would just be a simple, not sim, I wouldn't say simple, but it would be a permit through ODOT. They would do the review.
Okay. Because I'm a little leery of requiring something that they might not be allowed to do.
We actually had, wasn't a project that came before you, didn't meet the type 3 design review, but it was a recent, the Taco Bell over by Safeway. They were required to do some striping work, and they constructed a pedestrian crossing island. Both of those improvements were in ODOT right of way. So this would be work that would be permitted. There's a process through ODOT to get the approval.
Thank you.
And is the light shielding actually in the application? You talked about shielding the tall lights.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. The applicant is proposing to update those fixtures, the actual like light fixture on those poles to be full cutoff or fully shielded fixtures. They just are requesting to keep the poles there and not have to remove them and put new ones in.
Do any other commissioners have questions for staff? Yeah, I don't see any, so I'd like to invite the applicant to come up at this time. If you wouldn't mind coming up and giving us your name and address for the record, welcome. Can you hear me? No.
I have to hold it. Hi, I'm Megan Panarella. I am the project manager for Clark Jose and for the Salute project. Robin is also on the line. She is the owner.
Closer to you, please.
Yeah. Robin, she is also on the line. She is representing the owner. Slide.
There's a switch underneath if you want, so it keeps it on.
That's it, yeah. And for our slideshow, I think Robin will start kind of going over what this clinic offers the community.
Good evening. So the Salute Medical Center first opened its doors in December of 1998, and between 2003 and 2005, we expanded the building to accommodate a dental and pharmacy. Since then, we have not done any other significant renovations. Salute has about 10,000 patients, and we provided 27,000 visits last year. On any given day, we see up to about 500 patients. In addition to providing primary care in women's health, we have family dentistry, we have a pharmacy, and we provide community services, including WIC nutritional services, prescription assistance, and community health education classes. As mentioned, Salute has not had any significant renovations since 2005. However, our client base is growing. And in addition to the interior of the building needing some love, The site needs a lot of love. We've got some safety issues with people making it across our parking lot. So really looking at trying to improve our parking lot with additional sidewalks. And then also a lot of our patients rely on public transportation and they walk. So same thing with the crosswalk and sidewalks, and just in trying to add additional parking to the site itself. Because at this point we have got some slight parking wars that go on a daily basis between patients and staff. We do feel that the improvements will not only be a benefit to our staff and clients, but we do feel that there'll be a benefit to the community of Woodburn as well. We're very excited about the project, and I'm going to hand the presentation back over to Megan and let her kind of walk you through kind of all the fine details of it. And thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Next slide. This is the existing site plan. We just wanted to show how it looks right now. And I think Dan that was touching on the issues of the crosswalk, and we were just trying to point out the slope of the site that we're working with at the front of the property. And just to point out the current parking lot condition and that original drive aisle in is rather short. And currently there's a big backup of traffic that occurs getting cars onto the site. And we had a traffic analysis done, and the high peak traffic occurs during rush hour traffic. So it's a combination of the highway and the amount of cars going down the highway, and then the amount of cars going on site. The traffic analysis showed that there's about 583 cars that go on and then off the site per day within a 14-hour that they did the traffic analysis. So that amount of cars are coming off the highway trying to get onto the site, and it's just bottlenecking in this current condition. Next slide. Our proposed improvements. There's a few different things. Parking, when they're going on site and there isn't enough parking there, there's a lot of waiting, and that again, that's causing the backup of traffic. So we're creating a few new parking spaces to accommodate the current shortage that they have right now. It's a pretty big shortage that they have. We're adding sidewalks on both sides of that drive aisle. The existing condition only had a drive aisle on the far west side. So pedestrians are having to cross that entry, and you have, people trying to get on and people trying to get off, and it's just, it's not safe. And what we're trying to do is create this other sidewalk on right next to the crosswalk side, so they don't have to cross that drive aisle anymore. The new right
to the bus stop, right? I think that's what you meant.
Well, on the very far side, on the east side, you'll see a path line that comes from the bus stop area, and that connects to the other sidewalk. So none of the pedestrians trying to get on site will have to cross that drive aisle, creating two pretty safe pathways on. The right-hand exit aisle, it is only exit only. It is again to bring some of that traffic away. It's purely for safety issues. It's to get the people that are turning right over the crosswalk and bringing that onto the other side, so that right-hand traffic isn't going over that crosswalk area. It alleviates that pressure in that driveway. And then we elongated the drive aisle onto the site so it can bring the patients in so that they're away from that highway a little bit more. And the existing had parking that people had to navigate through as people are coming on site. So they don't have that issue anymore. So hopefully with these conditions, it will not be backed up as much and it's a safer zone. Next slide. So we're really not adding to the building other than to put a vestibule in and to create an entry to this pharmacy area that will be operating not necessarily at the same time as the clinic. So we wanted to really make sure that that was highlighted and that the people understood this is the entry for your pharmacy. And we created the parking lot to the right so that that and in turn could be the parking lot that people that are using the pharmacy could use and get to the pharmacy safe. We try to mimic the current conditions so that it ties into the aesthetics of the building, but we did set it back so it's not highlighted as the main entry and doesn't compete with that main entry. Next slide, please. So just to get a taste of the interior, we are doing interior improvements. It's not what we're here for, but it is part of the project and it's really important for the community to have these improvements. We're updating the main entry vestibule, so it's a little easier to navigate for the public. Next slide, please. We're creating this pharmacy over on its own wing, and again, to be connected with the public when the clinic itself is not operational. And then we are, next slide, reconfiguring the care team and what the care team looks like. If we put them in a central location, they have better connection with their exam areas, and it also creates some extra exam rooms for the patients. Next slide. On the second floor, we are renovating the lobby of the WIC area and the conference rooms. These areas are public, open to the public, and they provide a service that the public needs. So I think that's it.
Thank you. Does anyone on the commission have questions for the applicant?
I had one question. We had Mr. Griffiths wrote to us and asked where would the trucks loading and unloading, where would trucks be parked?
That's a good question. I don't think our plans indicated where that was going to be. If we go to the site plan, there was a few areas that we were looking at. In the east area, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 stalls, and then I don't know if I can point or
orange arrow that points out the loading zone is back there. Is that what you're saying?
yes,
Okay. So
those
that would be
spaces.
truck parking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Currently, I believe the trucks that are on site aren't necessarily semi trucks. That's my understanding.
Correct. Most of our delivery trucks are FedEx style size box trucks.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Commissioner Bartel, Commissioner Lassen?
No, I don't.
I had a point of order. Just for our record, gentleman spoke while you were presenting. Can we get the name and address
That's
for the record?
My
Carlson.
apologies. Yeah, I'm Tyler Carlson, Portland, Oregon.
And he's the principal of Clark Joe's.
I apologize for the interruptions there. I was just trying to create some clarification. I'll pay for it
And-
tomorrow. Again.
And
I'm
can we
sorry.
get your address? A little more
One
than
two,
40.
yeah, 12800 Southeast Cooper Street.
Thank you. Okay, hearing no other questions for the applicant. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor? Any proponents of this project? Seeing none, do we have any opponents? Anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay, I do note that we did get a letter from Waltex Comcast in our packet. I believe all the commissioners received it and had an opportunity to read it.
Did you want a response to it or?
You are welcome to rebut anything that you would like at this time. I don't see any other opposition, but now it's time for a rebuttal from the applicant. If you would like to address their concerns.
Sure. There's a few things listed in here and one is the reduction of the entrance exit distance to the adjacent property to the west. And it said adding 2 lanes of west directional traffic. We measured the driveway per ODOT's requirements. We are only allowed, I think it's 170 feet. And that's what we place the driveway according. It's actually probably more because I think the recommendation is to narrow the drive aisle down to 12 feet. So it's even further at this point. So I think we're within the requirements of ODOT. The cut required for the new driveway and the required retaining walls would adversely affect the Doug fir trees. We did review, had an arborist report within our application. An arborist has looked at that, and one, we are not putting a retaining wall. We are regrading that area to create that drive aisle, and we're within 20 feet of where the route would be affected. So we're not, I have to rephrase that. We're starting the grading outside that 20-foot radius for the routes. And C, avoid adding any additional right-hand out lane to the existing driveway should the applicant deem it will, I'm not reading this. Can be avoided by adding an additional right-hand lane to the existing driveway. The existing driveway already has a right-hand lane turning lane on it, and it's in the aerial view that was shown. So it already has one. We're just moving it away from the crosswalk to create some safety. I think it's the next one would be the delivery. And I think we addressed that. We just need to put the striping on our plans. The trees at the top of the slope, we're not taking any of those major trees down. We're not touching them. We're trying to save them. And we're trying to add some kind of landscaping for erosion control and buffering. And then the screening, honestly, the requirement to have the CMU wall, we put the wall in, we looked at where the footing was, and we had the arborist look at what that would do to some of the trees along the property line. We would have to remove 11 additional trees and 4 significant trees in order to get that in. And that's why we were asking for the variance on the fence. And I think that was the last of his comments.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions for the applicant or for staff before I close the hearing?
Sorry, this is Deb. Where you're proposing the extra driveway, will there also be light poles added so that visibility is better through that area?
Yes, we'll be adding 1 additional street light pole at the edge of that exit only drive aisle. We're working with PG currently and have their design in ODOT.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, I will go ahead and close this portion and we are welcome to deliberate. Somebody was hoping for a cut and dry. This one seems pretty cut and dry to me. I do thank you for addressing the concerns of the neighbor.
Well, I did think that Mr. Griffiths, I forgot who the group he's with. I don't have it here, but he asked a lot of good questions and they had good answers, I thought.
Yeah.
I think so. I do like the landscaping, the safety aspects of it. Yeah,
Yeah, good use of the space, it looks like.
I think so. Okay, I would entertain a motion if there's no further deliberation.
Online, it seemed like Martell had gotten off, Commissioner Martell had gotten off. There you go.
No, I just said, I think it sounds like a great plan and it's definitely needed. I think it's very well thought out.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I interrupt?
Sure.
Commissioner Lassen, do you have any comments?
I have a motion. I move the planning commission approve DR 23-09, SA 23-07, and VAR 23-07 Salute Medical Center renovation at 1175 Mount Hood Avenue, subject to the provisions of the staff report and that a final decision be prepared for the signature of the chair.
Sure. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second.
Apologies, Chair. I'm just going to ask if you wouldn't mind amending the motion to incorporate the changes of staff's memo from January 9th.
Yes.
Ditto.
Yeah. So we have a revised motion and second.
Oh, there it is, right in front of me.
Sorry, I was slow on the draw there.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
To the right. See agenda. Right. So we have one more hearing this evening. Yes, that is design review 23-08, grading Pacific Building C at 2775 North Front Street. So design review application to construct a 2,200 600 square feet warehouse building in the front of the property near North Front Street. A street adjustment application is included to request a modified cross-section for North Front Street. A variance application is also included with requests not to meet the standards related to street improvements, street lighting, pedestrian access, landscaping, and overhead power lines. Design review 23-08, SA 23-05, and variance 2306. Is there a staff report?
No.
Gotta follow our procedures, right?
Yeah, we need to do the staff declaration first.
And
Oh, I'm sorry. Would you please read the hearing statement? Just getting ahead of myself.
Declaration.
Sorry. Yes, we have to do the declarations before the. It's late.
I apologize. It is late. So, is there anyone on the commission that has had any ex parte communications or site visits that they need to claim? No.
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 Hearing none online either. Is there any challenges to the commission? Hearing none. Can you please read the hearing?
Happily, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Both Oregon law and the Woodburn Development Ordinance govern evidentiary quasi-judicial land use hearings and require that the commencement of the hearing, a statement be read to all the persons in attendance. The applicable substantive criteria for this land use decision are listed in the staff report and are as followed. Woodburn Development Ordinance, and this is a list, I apologize, 1.04.03, 2.04, 2.06, 3.01 through 3.07, 3.10.08, 3.10.11, 4.01, 4.02, 5.03.02, 5.03.03, and 5.03.12. The hearing will proceed in the following general order. Staff report, applicant's presentations, testimony in favor of the application, testimony in opposition to the application, rebuttal, closure of the record, deliberation, and decision. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria just stated or to other criteria in a plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise a constitutional or other issue relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party wanting a continuance or to keep the record open must make that request while the record is still open.
Okay, thank you. Now, do we have a staff report?
We do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
There we go. So this slide should look pretty familiar. We are here again for a type 3 land use application package. Design review, street adjustment, variance. Once again, Planning Commission holds a public hearing, issues a decision for type 3 applications. I will go ahead and enter the staff report and its attachments into the record. And I also have a couple other documents to enter in. For those of you here in the room, commissioners here in the room, you also have 4 other documents that we're waiting for you. One is a piece of written testimony from the applicant's engineer, Mr. Bill Pease, who is on the call as well. And then the other 3 documents, Commissioner Corning requested earlier today. They're just background documents that were referenced in Mr. Pease's testimony. So I want to add those to the record. And we are kind of same general area of town, a little bit further north. This time 2775 North Front Street. It's the northern city limits. This just kind of triangle here is all in our light industrial zoning district. And then on the other side of Front Street, we have the railroad tracks, and then most of our industrial park is over here. So before I go into the today's proposal, I do want to just kind of run through a little bit of background for this development or for this site here. Starting back in 1999, the Planning Commission approved a 27,500 square foot industrial building for this property. This is an aerial image of the site from 2000. So you can see that building starting to be built. A year later, the Planning Commission approved a separate building, 14,400 square feet. That's this building right here. At that time, that was a separate piece of property for a separate developer. If we fast forward a few years to 2007, the Planning Commission approved a 15,000 square foot expansion to the Grading Pacific site. You can see that here. This is the 2009 aerial, and that's right here, that 15,000 square foot addition there. 2008, Planning Commission approved a smaller, about 4,000, little under 4,000 square feet addition onto the Grading Pacific building here. And then the most recent expansion of the Grading Pacific site occurred 2019. That was just under 19,000 square feet, again, right here. And part of this 2019 approval, the two properties here were consolidated. Grading Pacific purchased this second piece of property, consolidated it in. So now it's one complete parcel under single ownership. So that brings us to today. The application in review today is a third building, a 22,600 square foot building intended for additional warehouse storage space for the business. Also proposing some additional pavement here in the front, 5 additional parking spaces. And this pavement here in front functions as the emergency fire lane in order to get access to all sides of the building. So I'm going to outline a number of requests the applicant is making tonight. Mainly, as sites redevelop, we have thresholds in our development code that trigger improvements to portions of the site or the street frontage that don't meet current code requirements. We saw elements of that in our last 2 projects. So this project also, just based on the size of the proposed building, requires full site upgrades. Besides what I'm about to go through, this proposal does meet our code requirements or can through conditions of approval. So first request being made tonight is related to street improvements. Front Street is a minor arterial. You can see the planned cross-section for minor arterials here. And right below it is a recent street view taken from Google Maps of what the street looks like there. So it's more like the county highway. Again, it's right on that city limits boundary. This is pretty much what Front Street, I think it changes its name to something else once it leaves city limits, but It's basically what it looks like going all the way up to Hubbard. And the applicant is requesting to maintain this current configuration. So not widening the street to put in that center turn lane, no bike lane, no curb and gutter system, and then not putting in that landscape strip and sidewalk here. They are also requesting to maintain some private facilities, I'll call them, within the public right-of-way. So this monument sign right here is now within public right-of-way. The water meter and fire vault that serve the property are now within right-of-way. And the applicant's requesting to maintain those as is. Staff has conditions of approval to relocate those private facilities to be on private property. That's generally public works policy for these types of improvements. And they're requesting to not do those in addition to not doing the street improvements. Couple things I wanted to call out. Our transportation system plan identifies bike lanes and sidewalk along North Front Street, going all the way to the city limits boundary. Those are covered in 2 separate TSP projects as high priority projects for the city. So those are some things that we factor into as we consider the request to not do this. Understanding that this is kind of the northern limits of the city here, the current configuration also of the street also extends south all the way down towards the high school. So a fair amount of distance, only about 6 property owners between them and where the frontage improvements more closely, or the street improvements more closely aligned to this cross section. But that all being said, staff is supportive of the request with a few conditions provided. We are recommending they pay a fee in lieu as part of their project to cover these half-street improvements for their project, or for their frontage, excuse me. They have about 417 feet of frontage. And it's a couple reasons for that. One, widening the street here to have half a center turn lane, a bike lane, and a sidewalk when those improvements don't continue north or south for a significant amount of distance. There's some safety concerns involved. No, drivers can't feasibly use a 6-foot turn lane. There's a bike lane that might confuse cyclists on where they're supposed to be. So rather than having this small segment of improvements put in now, we're recommending that fee in lieu so that the city can come in at a future time, put in a wider or a longer stretch of those improvements in one project, and have it all kind of match and cohesively tie in together. And then part of the reason for those conditions of approval to relocate the sign and those other water facilities, that just helps make it easier for when the city does come in to do that project. We don't have to worry about getting those things relocated or getting delayed by their relocation. So it just kind of wraps that future city project, or it sets it up for success. Moving on, applicants requesting a variance regarding power lines. So you can see here, again, here's that image of the street view. There are power lines running along the frontage of their property. Our development ordinance requires these lines be buried, be underground. or in certain circumstances, a fee in lieu could be paid. So just to give you some information about these lines, they include high voltage transmission lines, which are like long distance. They cover a lot of ground, a lot of county and city ground. There's more local, lower voltage distribution lines. That's what homes and businesses tie into. And then there's also a communications company has a line on that pole, on those poles as well. For this particular set of lines here, the burial would only be limited only to the distribution and communication lines, because PGE pretty adamantly opposes burial of their transmission lines. And that's actually reflected in our development ordinance as well. Those would be exempted. So for that burial of just the lines along their frontage, PGE estimates that's about $375,000. That would also add 2 poles, one on either end of the property. And like I mentioned just previously, the transmission lines would stay there, so those poles would also stay. So not only are we not removing that pole, the transmission poles, but we're also adding 2 burial poles at either end. And all that's to say that would all need to be relocated when that street gets widened. So for all those reasons, staff is recommending a fee in lieu, just like we've conditioned for a number of recent design review projects. The applicant's variance request is to not bury the lines nor pay the fee in lieu. Moving on, the applicant's also requesting a variance to the street lighting requirement. From initial talks with our public works staff, I was told likely there would be 2 street lights required for this frontage to meet city requirements. In this case, this section of town, the nearest street light is down by the intersection with Hazelnut Drive, so it's kind of down by the high school. So it's a fair amount away. If the applicant were to put in light poles right now as part of this project, they would likely be located within this gravel shoulder here in order to adequately illuminate the current street. That assumes your approval of their street adjustment or street improvement variance request. So I say that to also share that those light poles would need to be relocated if city came in to widen the street as well. So staff is supportive of the request to not put in that street lighting at this point in time. We would just obtain a fee in lieu. And then there were several additional variance requests I just wanted to walk through quickly. First being a walkway connection between the main building entrances and the public sidewalk within right-of-way. That's a standard requirement within our development ordinance. Applicant is requesting to not put in that walkway connection. One, it's kind of associated with their request to not put in the sidewalk. And then also just worth noting, the business is not open to the public, so it's not anticipating pedestrian traffic from the public accessing the site. So staff is supportive of the request, assuming the sidewalk doesn't get put in. Next request, there was a prior variance, actually going back several design review, several expansions. This request has been approved multiple times by the commission related to their landscaping requirements. So they have a fair amount of asphalt pavement on the property, a lot of outdoor storage area, equipment maneuvering area. just operational needs for that much pavement. And as part of that, they are not fully meeting our landscaping requirements for the site. So that was a prior variance that was approved by the commission. They're requesting to maintain that variance. They do provide in their front yard on their property, a 10-foot strip of landscaping along the street frontage to help kind of screen the development from view from the street. So staff support of the variance continuing to apply. And then this last one here wasn't specifically outlined in your staff report. Actually, contrary to it, there's a condition of approval for meeting our on-site lighting requirements. But the testimony from the applicant's engineer discussed it as a likely request, so I added it here. We have requirements for height limits for those exterior lights on the property, and they are requesting to have any new lighting match what the existing development has, so it's consistent. And that existing lighting would exceed height limits, so they're requesting to maintain that non-conforming height limit.
So they're asking to put in new lighting that's non-conforming?
Correct.
Not just existing lighting.
And staff doesn't really have a concern about that. And it's an industrial area. They have a tall building, a lot of pavement. There's security and safety concerns. So we don't have an issue with that. Similar variances have been requested for other industrial properties. It's something we're actually pretty well aware of. The council approved via resolution staff to begin looking into modifying the code for these types of situations. So no major concerns with that one. So to kind of wrap up here, we're recommending approval with conditions. Those conditions cover meeting certain WDO requirements, development code requirements for parking. I talked about relocating those private facilities to be outside of public right-of-way. I talked about those fees in lieu for those street improvements, the landscape strip, sidewalk, the power line burial relocation, those new street lights. We have a significant tree in the front yard there, so we've got a condition for preserving that tree, condition for street trees. And then if the commission supports the anticipated additional lighting variance, we would need to strike condition 8 there. Last thing I want to say about the fee in lieu for power line burial, the conditioned fee that's recommended by staff uses the same method that the recent Chick-fil-A project was approved for. The recent Fleet Sales West project on 99E was approved with that conditioned fee, the rate. And it's about less than a third of what that PGE estimate is. So considerably less. And to kind of give one final argument for why staff is proposing that fee in lieu. Over the past 20 years, we've seen a number of expansions and additions to the property, nearly quadrupling the amount of building area over this entire site. So with this most recent here expansion of 22,600 square feet, property more or less becomes fully built out. There's pretty limited room to further expand on the site. And city's general policy for development is that it pays for the improvements along their street frontages. This may be the last development we see, substantial development on this property we see for quite some time.
So are you saying that we haven't asked for fee in lieu for the previous improvements?
Very good question. These prior expansions, the property owner entered into a non-remonstrance agreement with the city. Essentially, that states they won't oppose the city implementing what's called a local improvement district. It's basically a way to recoup costs of putting in that roadway. It's stating they wouldn't oppose putting in that LID, local improvement district. They've also, as part of the 2019 approval, entered into an improvement agreement for a sidewalk improvement along their frontage. So they have entered into some agreements with the city about their frontage. The fee in lieu just becomes actual money that we have that we can put towards that CIP project.
Dan, could you describe that improvement agreement just for a second? What it entails, what it says, what it's trying to accomplish?
The 2019 agreement. That was specifically something the commission came to after working with the applicant at the 2019 hearing. Staff was recommending a 10-foot kind of a shared use bike path and sidewalk along the frontage. That's essentially what exists further to the south by the high school along Front Street. And actually no part of Front Street has bike lanes, so it would tie in well once those other properties redevelop and put in that same improvement. It would tie in nicely. This improvement agreement was something the commission agreed to after working with the applicant at the hearing. Rather than putting in that sidewalk during the 2019 expansion, that agreement said, we'll put in our sidewalk when either the city comes in to do the improvement or our neighbor to the south puts in a sidewalk. So that was the agreement that's the commission conditioned last time. A lot of words there, sorry.
So reading Mr. Pease's, the engineer's letter, quite a bit of what he didn't like were things that had to do with rebuilding Front Street. So is that likely to happen? Again, we're faced with people thinking, this Front Street's never going to be built out, so why should I put in a sidewalk? It's never going to meet.
Right. The fact is it's identified twice in our transportation system plan for sidewalk and bike lane improvements as high priority improvements along Front Street. It's anticipated to be built into that minor arterial cross section. We just don't have
future.
We don't have an exact time, but
so could they? So the relocation of the sign, the fee in lieu, well, that would be fee in lieu. Relocation of the fire valve and undergrounding power utilities. Those things could just be agreed to be done in another agreement, like the one you signed in 2020.
That could be an option. You could pursue that as well, rather than the fee. The commission could pursue that as an option instead.
Does this agreement stay with the property if it was sold to a different owner? Does it stay with?
Correct, yes.
So if I'm understanding correctly, position of the staff is to collect the fee in lieu now and replace this agreement.
Right. That's staff's recommendation, but like Commissioner Corning just brought up, the a separate agreement or an amended agreement is an option you could take.
I am going to ask council for a kind of a point of order. It is getting close to 10 o'clock. I know that we can assess where we are with this. We can hear from the applicant, continue with testimony from the applicant and public, and maybe close the hearing and deliberate at a later time. I believe we could also just leave the hearing open, which I don't think we want to do, but we could leave the hearing open, or we can continue. Is that, are those options appropriate?
Those options are absolutely appropriate. Because the applicant is here, I know the hour is late. So, you know, it might be a nice opportunity to at least allow them to introduce some evidence, and then, you know, they can, depending on how much information is needed from the applicant this evening or other people here to testify, it would be at your discretion to either continue the hearing and leave it open, or if you think you've received all the information that you need, you could close the public hearing and come back at a different time for deliberation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for staff before I call the applicant up? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the applicant up and I'm going to ask for testimony. Please take the time that you think you need for your testimony. I am not rushing you. I will ask for other testimony according to the rules of order. And once that testimony is finished and we start deliberation, I will ask my fellow commissioners for input on how they would like to proceed. So I just want to give everybody a heads up that that's the likely path that we're going to follow for the rest of the evening. Okay. So with that, I'd like to invite the applicant to come up and testify. Welcome. Please state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Ron Robertson. My brother Jeff and I are the owners of the Cirrus Northwest, which is the landowner. We are also the owners of Grading Pacific. It's just the real estate's held outside of the operating company. With me tonight is Josh Wells from West Tech Engineering. He's a civil engineer on our project and has been involved in multiple projects of ours in the past. I'd like to first start by thanking everybody for being here at this hour on this evening, and also for the efforts of staff over the 23 years that we've been here in Woodburn. They've always been very fair to us, and Dan has been very helpful on our last two improvements, and he's intimately aware of our operations. I would ask the commissioners who haven't been involved in some of our prior discussions and appearances during our other developments, if I just looked at it real quick, it sounds like these guys don't want to do anything. And nothing could be further from the truth. There's nothing we'd rather see than Front Street being widened out to the vision that's been presented this evening, just like the vision that you have for the first group that came before you for the Wimmer Farm. So we'd love to see that. The reality of that is something different, and it's something we've been dealing with since 2007. So I would like to ask Josh to just do a quick summary of the potential, what's called for in the improvement and the potential that we're looking at, that those improvements would take place.
Yeah, so what would happen is there improvements.
Sorry, did we get your name and
sorry.
address as well?
Yeah, I'm Josh Wells with West Tech Engineering.
Thank you.
3841 Fairview Industrial Drive, Southeast Salem, Oregon 97302. Let me back up real quick. The vision that city has in the TSP that was shown in that cross section is not physically possible because of the railroad tracks on the east side of the project. Because they can't the railroad's never going to dedicate right away, right, to build a sidewalk. However, so what's happened is on the west side, so grading Pacific and all the applicants to the south are asked to be dedicated a little bit more right of way to accommodate a wider sidewalk and all that stuff in the future to meet the TSP. So that's just a little bit of extra. But so what would happen is we would be required to widen the road, put in a curb gutter sidewalk, a 10-foot wide sidewalk. And what that would require is us to move the transmission lines, the fire vault, the electrical vaults, cut down the big trees in front, move the signage, the existing signage as well. And so those are the impacts that they would have just from logistics to get that done. There would be extra power poles required to be placed because they would move them over and then come back. Some of the stuff would be undergrounded, but you would have comms that would be undergrounded. You would have the distribution lines from PGE would be undergrounded, but the transmission lines would still be there. So the power poles will still be there no matter what happens. And so really how I see this happening is whatever happens, however the city goes about improving the street, really how it would happen was it would be a large capital improvement project driven by the city to improve the street, right? And they would take city funding, public funding, whatever grants to make that happen. And at that point, the city would then do a design, right? They would take it out to bid. They would have to move all the power poles over. And at that point, by moving all the power poles over, those are franchise utilities. And so because they're in the right of way, the franchise utility would have to move all those utilities over on their dime because that's in the franchise agreement. Same with comms and everything else. So the fee in lieu for undergrounding those utilities are kind of like it's no man's money, right? It's going to be sitting there somehow, but the utility is probably going to end up paying for it anyways at the end instead of the city. And I think that covers all the like improvements, the logistics of it. Do you want to talk about
I'd like to talk about the
specific
conditions of them.
Specific ones?
Per the letter that you received from Mr. Pease, who's with us this evening remotely, we've agreed to many of the 13 conditions. The things that we object to are really common sense or things that have been addressed previously. And the first one is the signage. There's a suggestion here that we need to remove the existing signage out front because it's in the public right of way. Well, who are these jerks that put signs in the public right of way? We placed that sign probably 15 to 20 years ago with this proper sign permit as directed by the city. When we acquired the property, when Dan went through it, he did good on that chronology of the property that we own. Then we bought the building in front. When we bought the building in front, that therefore brought our property up to Front Street. So now when we went to do our improvement in 2020, they said, well, you have to grant us a wider easement because we're going to widen Front Street one day. So at that time, we granted an additional 14 feet for the right of way, which now plugs our sign in your right of way. So we didn't put it there in the right of way. At the time it was placed, it was on private property. Now it's on the right of way. And as part of the
and that also has to do with the changing of the TSP in 2019 that made the street right away a lot wider. Right. So
our improvement agreement of June 2nd, 2020, as part of this granting of the 14 feet of our property for the proposed widening of Front Street that's probably never going to occur in our lifetimes, include a commentary that when those improvements are to be made, that we need to move our sign at our expense. And we've already signed an agreement with the city to do that. So
that also includes the fire vault and the FTC as well.
That's correct. So Number 5 on this, we object to moving it at this time. We're already in agreement to move it at our expense when the improvements are being made. The sign's been there for 15 years with no obstruction to anything. The city does nothing to maintain the right of way that they have been granted by us. We take care of the whole thing. So we're just saying, let's be logical. Why are we going to move it now? We'll move everything at one time. So we're asking for a deviation from number 5. Number 9 is an insignificant matter. We put in the number of trees that the city asked for in 2020. As part of that development plan, they're asking for 2 more trees now, or $500. We'll put in the trees. It doesn't matter. So let's move on from that. Number 11 is the fee in lieu on the street improvements. There's been no secret of the desire to widen Front Street to what's currently being asked. And in 2007, when we weren't even property owners adjacent to Front Street, our property was further back. 2007, it was recognized that someday we need to widen Front Street, and we would love to see it happen. However, there's been no plan, but in 2007, we entered a non-remonstrance agreement that runs for 40 years. And for the next 40 years from the date of that agreement, which was August 5th, 2008, we agreed to pay our fair share of whatever that cost would be at the time. That agreement still runs. It's current. 40 years we've given you to widen the street out, and you still have 23 to go. So it's not that we're objecting to do these things. This idea of paying a fee now, we've already signed on. We'll pay our share for 40 years. We all know it's not going to happen. That's the difficult part. We'd love for it to happen. It's not going to. The idea of paying $150,000 now going to just sit in outer space that we get no benefit from, and the city doesn't get any benefit from. That doesn't make sense. We have an agreement in place that will take care of it. So we would ask that the fee in lieu in number 11 be removed, that we will rely on the agreement that we signed that was good for 40 years and remains good tonight. That also included street lighting. The last thing is the power line burial. And as was indicated, if PG&E is going to even allow burial of the power lines for the 400 feet of our property, it's going to go from 1 power pole there to now 3 power poles, because they bring the distribution lines to the first power pole at the north end of our property. The utilities go down that power pole, go underground on our property and get to the south end of our property. Now there's another power pole that goes up so that the power lines can remain up above the street to service the rest of the community who's not affected by this agreement. We have no problem with undergrounding the utilities when the street is widened. And we would request that we create another improvement agreement that would guarantee our performance on that. As Josh indicated, PG&E is a franchise with the city. So if the city elects to widen Front Street, it is at the undergrounding of the utilities will essentially be at no cost to the city. The power poles will be moved by PGE. The undergrounding would either be paid by PGE or ourselves. There's no exposure of cost to the city. So the thought of paying $114,000 fee in lieu at this time, when we would once again get no benefit whatsoever, nor would the city, it just doesn't seem logical. Let's create another improvement agreement that will cover our obligation to cover any costs that the city would bear for undergrounding those utilities when Front Street is widened.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant? See Commissioner Bartel, you're still online. I can't tell if Commissioner Lassen is online.
I'm here.
Okay. Oh, yes. Yes, he is. So do either of you have any questions for the applicant?
Talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, could you start again, Commissioner Lassen? Chris, could you, Commissioner Lassen, could you speak into your phone for me? I'm sorry, Commissioner Lassen, I can't pick you up. If you can, call back into my phone. I appreciate your patience, Madam Chair. Commissioners.
I don't have any questions, Chair Ellsworth.
Thank you. While we're waiting for Commissioner Lassen to call back in, do we have any clarifying questions for staff, since we have a little bit of time?
I guess I do want to ask, I mean, is a non-remonstrance agreement in play for power line burial?
It could, any of these improvements could be put into an improvement agreement.
So does that mean that if we wanted to adjust the existing ones to another 40 years rather than, or?
Oh, there's a little distinction here. So there was the prior non-remonstrance agreement, which is specific, I believe, to a local the city creating a local improvement district. And then there was the improvement agreement. Improvement agreement, I believe, runs with the land.
That's correct. There's no expiration on that improvement agreement.
Whereas the non-remonstrance agreement, I believe it has an expiration.
It's 40 years.
I'd like to ask, I guess, staff, what benefit does the fee in lieu provide the city? Does it advance it? Does it provide us a benefit to want to go that route versus if we're gonna get the funds anyway, what's the benefit to collecting it now? Does that speed it up? What does it do?
It gives a little more, I guess, certainty towards having the funds right up front. Potentially could move a project forward. That would be out of my hands, but
or we could wait and let inflation take its toll. I know, I understand the burden of hand, and then it's like, if I ask for 100,000 now, or I wait 10 years, I get 150. I mean, or okay, are we able to hear Commissioner Lassen? Does he have any questions?
Let me try again. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes.
One more time. I'm afraid I'm not getting Commissioner Lassen. That's my bad. Just maybe just for a bit of clarification, if it helps. I think this might help sort of inform the discussion. I want to clarify just for a second the sort of the difference between the improvement agreement, is that the title that they have for this, and a non-remonstrance agreement.
Okay.
And sort of what's included and excluded. And please, I'll ask Mackenzie or Dan to jump in. The non-remonstrance agreement is simply, all that says is that if a future LID is formed, this property owner won't object to it. Period. That's all there's nothing else to a non-remonstrance agreement.
Okay.
The real sort of, if I may, the sort of meat to this would be the improvement agreement, which again, I'm summarizing broadly, X terms, I don't know exactly which things are included, and might ask Dan to kind of walk through which is included in that and which is not included in it right now. That says that essentially when and if the project's ever done up front, they'll pay for their share of what was going on in front. I don't think it includes the pavement and the asphalt improvements. Right. I think it pretty much includes those other elements in front of their site, sidewalks, vault relocation, signage, these types of pieces. So they're a little bit different.
Yes, but the non-remonstrance agreement specifically states that not only will we not object to the formation and the improvements of the improvement district, we will not object to assessing the cost to benefited parties. So we are financially bound to pay our fair share.
But that would be the LID.
Right.
That's what the LID accomplishes, right? Again, that doesn't form an LID. It doesn't say it's ever going to happen. It says you won't object if an LID is ever formed.
And we will
Right.
not assess.
That's different than the improvement agreement, which is much essentially stronger, if I can. It says if it happens, they're going to do it and pay that money for it.
Should we postpone the hearing so that they could go back to staff? I mean, rather than just postponing or delaying or whatever word we're going to use.
Well, we can leave the hearing open. We can continue to hear testimony and leave the hearing open. We can continue to hear testimony and close the hearing and deliberate at a later date. We could close the hearing like we did earlier. If new information comes to light, we can reopen it if we wanted to, but I don't know if that would entail special notice or not.
Again,
Or we could go till it ends.
it's entirely, I think maybe you could kind of finish the hearing part since we're here and go through it and see how it goes. Again, it's entirely up to you. If you want to go and ask more questions, we can have that discussion after that, sort of see where you're at, if that's all right. I think it's a good idea to take that vote once we do.
So
You may get through.
I think what I'd like to do is ask if we've got any testimony in favor of this project. Listen to that. Ask if we have any testimony in opposition. Listen to that, or any neutral testimony. And see where we are as a commission and decide, do we want to close the hearing and come back later and deliberate? Do we want to power through? But I think it would make the most sense at this point in time to hear any other additional testimony.
Yes, I agree.
And then determine there where we're gonna go. And I think I pretty much see agreement from our commission. So I'm sorry, sir, are you done, may I ask?
Yeah,
Or-
looks like,
You have
uh,
questions
Thank
of
you
me?
so much.
Looks like Mr. Pease.
Do
would
we
like
have
to speak.
anyone else that wants to speak in favor of this project?
Yes, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you give
My
us your
name is
name and
Will-
address? Oh, thank
My
you.
name is William Pease. I am a part-time employee with MSC Engineers, located on Pipe Bend Place in Salem. This is my 5th or 6th time before the Planning Commission with this property. I actually was involved before Cirrus Northwest bought the property, when the original developer was involved with this building. I really do not have a lot to add. You have my written testimony. I gave it a lot of thought, tried to give a lot of background. And I think probably the main issue is that, yes, we don't believe it's appropriate to pay a whole bunch of money now for something that's not going to happen for 20 or 30 or 40 years. I could make an argument that minor arterial status probably is not even the appropriate street classification for something that is going to turn into a turnpike with 24 feet of pavement immediately north of us. And Marion County has said that the traffic counts do not justify them considering improvements. So be that as it may, our original way back when was that this would be a collector street, which now is more known as a local industrial street, and would not require all of the improvements that are there. I think I pointed out in my written testimony that there's only one little piece of sidewalk the whole length of North Front Street. There are no street lights except at the intersection. There is no undergrounding of utilities, and it just patently makes no sense that the last parcel at the city limits, which is also the urban growth boundary, would have all of these requirements when we're the end of the road. And so I'd be happy to try to answer any questions, but that's my analysis. And like I said, I've been involved with this parcel for many years.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of this project? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition of this project? Okay, hearing no opposition, there is no need for rebuttal. So before I close the hearing, let me look at my fellow commissioners and try to get a feel for what direction you guys would like to take.
And I'd like to continue the discussion to another meeting.
I would like to do it as well, but I would like to close the testimony, close the hearing,
Yes.
and come back and deliberate.
Yes.
I don't see any opposition from my commissioners. So with that, I'm going to close this hearing. And we will continue the deliberations to another time.
We need a motion.
Can I have a motion for that?
I move we continue considering the Grading Pacific applications. DR 2308, SA 2305, and VAR 2306 to the next Plan Commission meeting.
January 25th, 2023 or 2024.
So apologies. I need a second. Yep. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you all for your patience and your testimony. I do appreciate it.
Just a reminder for our commissioners, just as we discussed earlier this evening, when you took a recess between now and the next commission meeting, there shouldn't be any deliberation outside of this chamber.
Thank you. Right, do we have any information from staff?
No, I didn't. Just a super fast. Just wanted to let you know the last city council hearing meeting on Monday night. All of the current commissioners who were up for reappointment were reappointed to the planning commission. So congratulations.
Thank you.
To you all. That was not controversial and not surprising. That's all for now. I have some other things, but nothing that's pressing.
Right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
A second.
I will entertain a motion. I got a second, but I need a motion.
Oh, I motion that we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
To Chris for a thumbs up.
Thank you.
That's it. Now I know
We are
you're.
adjourned.
Thanks, Chris. We'll get it worked out.